Welcome the anointed ones. The deepest betrayal doesn't kick down your door. It already has a key, knows where you hide things, and still smiles at you during family photos. Let that sit for a second, because what you're about to hear isn't some exaggerated tale or dramatic rumor. It's a pattern, a real one. Psychologists have long noted that the most damaging betrayals statistically come from people within the immediate family circle, not enemies, not strangers, not outsiders. Why? Because access beats aggression every time. You don't need power when you have proximity. You don't need force when you have trust. And you definitely don't need to shout when you're already inside the house. This is the part that makes people uncomfortable. So expect a few nervous laughs. The kind people do when the truth walks into the room uninvited and sits down like it pays rent. Everyone loves the idea of loyalty until the story points inward. Until the finger doesn't point at them, but at one of ours. That's when the air changes. That's when denial clocks out early. What shocked the town wasn't that something ugly happened. Towns have seen ugly before. What shook them was realizing the damage didn't come from the outside. It came from someone who shared meals, memories, and last names. Someone who knew which buttons to push because they helped install them. Someone who didn't trip into betrayal. They navigated it like a shortcut they'd been mapping for years. And here's the uncomfortable comedy in all of it. People can accept a villain in a hoodie way faster than a villain in a family group chat. The moment the truth surfaced, you could almost hear the collective, "Wait, them? That pause right there? That's shock colliding with reality. That's the moment when disgust replaces confusion, because now the story can't be blamed on bad luck, misunderstandings, or spiritual attacks from nowhere. This isn't about drama, it's about exposure. It's about how being chosen doesn't just attract attention, it reveals character, especially in the people closest to you, especially in the ones who watched you grow and quietly resented that you didn't shrink to make them comfortable. So if you felt the room go quiet when the truth came out, if you noticed how fast sides shifted and stories cracked, good. That silence wasn't awkwardness. It was realization catching up to everyone at once. Number 1. The betrayal didn't come from hatred. It came from proximity. What makes this kind of betrayal hit differently is that it wasn't fueled by rage or open hostility. It was fueled by closeness. Hatred is loud. It announces itself. You can see it coming. Proximity is quiet. It sits next to you at the table. It knows your routines, your moods, your soft spots. That's why this kind of betrayal doesn't feel like an attack. It feels like the floor giving way under your feet. A sibling doesn't need to guess who you are. They've already watched you become it. They've seen you when you were unsure, when you were hopeful, when you were trying and failing and trying again. That kind of access creates an advantage most people never have. They know what hurts you because they were there when it first hurt. They know what motivates you because they've heard you talk when you thought you were safe. Nothing had to be forced. Everything was already within reach. This wasn't about anger boiling over. It was about familiarity being misused. When someone that close turns against you, they don't have to exaggerate much. A small twist of truth sounds believable because it comes wrapped in shared history. People trust it without realizing why. Not because the story is solid, but because the source feels familiar. That's why the damage goes so deep. You don't just lose trust in that person. You start questioning your own judgment. You replay moments. You wonder how long it was happening. You ask yourself, what else was real? Proximity turns betrayal into self-doubt, and that's the part that takes time to undo. The hardest truth is this. The betrayal wasn't spontaneous. It grew slowly in a place where trust lived. It was built on listening, observing, and waiting. Not because they hated you, but because they knew you well enough to know when to move. And that realization hurts more than any enemy ever could, because it didn't come from across the street. It came from across the room. Number 2. Your sibling didn't want your life. They wanted your position. This kind of betrayal isn't about wanting what you have. It's deeper, more insidious. It's about wanting the space you occupy, the attention you attract, the respect people give without question. Your sibling didn't care about your struggles, your dreams, or even your accomplishments. What they craved was the perception of power and influence that came naturally to you. They wanted to stand where you stood, be seen the way you were seen, and feel the recognition that was never theirs. When people witness this, they often mistake it for jealousy over material things. But it isn't that simple. It's about replacement. They weren't just competing with you. They were trying to occupy your identity in the eyes of others. Every smile you earned, every compliment, every quiet nod of respect became a mark of what they felt they were missing. They didn't need to destroy you outright. They needed to shift perception so that the world would start noticing them instead of you. That's why proximity mattered. They didn't have to invent influence. They just had to redirect it. This kind of betrayal feels personal because it hits at the core of your being. People can accept competition from outsiders, even enemies. But when someone who knows the blueprint of your life tries to step into it, it feels like the world itself is mocking you. Every success you earned now becomes evidence of what they can't have, and every interaction they twist becomes a weapon. What makes it even more shocking to the town is how deliberate it often is. This wasn't a rash decision or a moment of weakness. It's a strategy, developed over time, under the radar, until the moment when exposure couldn't be avoided. Your sibling waited until your position was undeniable, until your presence was commanding, and then tried to insert themselves into that space. The cruel irony is that their focus on replacing you exposes their own insecurity. They're not attacking you because they're strong. They're attacking you because they feel small. And that realization, when people finally see it, is what turns shock into disgust. The fact that someone so close could calculate, manipulate, and covet your position without anyone noticing is what keeps the story lingering in everyone's mind long after the reveal. Number 3. The town is disgusted because they see intent now, not accidents. What turns shock into disgust isn't just the act itself. It's the realization that it was intentional. People can forgive mistakes. They can shrug off bad timing, misunderstandings, or coincidences. But when the truth reveals deliberate planning, calculated moves, and cold awareness, everything changes. The moment the town understood that your siblings' actions weren't random, that they had been observing, waiting, and striking with precision, the reaction shifted. It's one thing to fall victim to chance, but it's another to fall victim to someone who knew exactly what they were doing and did it anyway. Intent has a weight that accidents don't. Accidents are forgivable because they carry uncertainty. Intent carries responsibility. It's a mark of consciousness, of knowing the difference between right and wrong and choosing the path that causes harm anyway. When people realized your sibling acted with full awareness, their perception of you changed, yes, but more importantly, their perception of them changed. Shock transformed into moral outrage. What was once dismissed as sibling rivalry or playful tension suddenly became something darker, more deliberate, and far more unsettling. The disgust isn't just toward the betrayal itself, it's toward the audacity it took to plan, hide, and execute it while presenting a mask of normalcy. The town saw the calm, collected exterior that belied the manipulation beneath, and that contrast is what made the revelation so jarring. People instinctively recoil when they encounter calculated deceit from someone they thought they knew, someone who shared the same bloodline and the same household. This kind of betrayal leaves a lasting impression because it forces everyone to recalibrate their understanding of loyalty and family. Accidents are fleeting, intent lingers. It reshapes relationships, shakes communities, and etches memories that can't be unlearned. The moment the town saw your siblings' full awareness, the deliberate choice to harm you for personal gain, everything changed. That's why the shock was immediate and the disgust so deep. It's a bitter recognition that harm doesn't always come from force or hate. Sometimes it comes quietly, knowingly, from the people closest to you. Number 4. Your sibling knew exactly when to strike because they tracked your growth. This betrayal wasn't impulsive. It wasn't a random explosion of anger or jealousy. It was timed with precision, and the reason it landed so hard is that your sibling had been observing you all along. They watched you evolve, adapt, and claim spaces that were always meant for you. They tracked not just what you were doing, but who you were becoming. They knew the exact moment when your influence, your confidence, and your presence could no longer be ignored, and that was the moment they decided to act. People often underestimate how methodical this kind of betrayal is. It's not about immediate gratification. It's about calculated impact. They didn't strike when you were vulnerable or small. They waited until you were undeniable, until your trajectory was clear, until your growth had made you a figure in the eyes of others. That's the cruel genius of it. Striking at your peak amplifies the shock, because it's impossible to dismiss. You weren't just attacked. The timing made it undeniable, inescapable, and public. What makes this especially piercing is that the awareness behind it reveals something far darker than mere rivalry. They weren't acting out of a moment of weakness or accidental frustration. They studied you, tracked your habits, and waited for the perfect alignment of circumstances. Your successes weren't just milestones for you, they were signals for them, markers of opportunity. That's why when the truth came out, the town couldn't just shake it off as a mistake. It was intentional, deliberate, and horrifyingly strategic. And the reality of this tracking exposes a level of intimacy most people never experience. They knew your rhythm, your routines, your vulnerabilities, and they used that knowledge as a weapon. It's a betrayal that feels almost impossible to process because it's built on trust that had been silently accumulated over years. They weren't outsiders. They weren't enemies. They were close enough to see your growth from the inside, and they chose to turn it against you at the moment it would hurt the most. That awareness, that timing, is what makes the shock linger and the disgust in the town so palpable. Number 5, they weaponized familiarity to make the lie believable. What makes this kind of betrayal so devastating isn't just the act itself, but the fact that it came from someone who was trusted implicitly. Familiarity is powerful. People instinctively lower their defenses around those they know, those who share their blood or their daily life. Your sibling didn't need to shout, threaten, or manipulate wildly. They already had the perfect camouflage: shared history, shared memories, shared trust. And they used it like a weapon. Every word, every gesture, every story was designed to feel credible because it came from someone people assumed would never deceive them. The brilliance and cruelty of it lies in the subtlety. A stranger lying to you has to be convincing, has to fabricate evidence, has to overcompensate. A familiar person doesn't. Their actions are trusted almost automatically, so the deception slides under the radar. That's why the town's reaction was so intense when the truth came out. They realized how easily people can be manipulated when familiarity is exploited. They realized that trust can be weaponized, and that someone so close could twist perception without anyone suspecting a thing. This betrayal is different because it forces people to re-examine their instincts. The lies were not only believable, they were comfortable. They felt natural. And that makes the eventual exposure sting even more, because it's not just the deception that shocks, it's the realization that people's own trust was used against them. It's a hard, lingering truth. The closer someone is to you, the more efficiently they can hurt you without leaving obvious scars. Familiarity gave them the advantage, and they exploited it fully. Every interaction, every casual conversation, every piece of shared history became a tool to strengthen the lie. When the town saw it unravel, the disgust wasn't just toward the betrayal. It was toward the ease with which the truth had been hidden in plain sight. That's why proximity, combined with intention, is so dangerous. It doesn't just harm the individual, it shakes the entire perception of loyalty, trust, and what people thought they knew about family. Number 6. Your sibling's silence wasn't loyalty, it was data collection. Silence can feel like patience, restraint, or even respect. People assume that when someone doesn't speak up, they're neutral, harmless, or loyal. That assumption is exactly what your sibling relied on. Their quiet wasn't about holding back or being careful. It was about watching, observing, and gathering every bit of information they could use. Every conversation you had, every reaction you showed, every strength and vulnerability you revealed was being logged mentally, catalogued, and analyzed. That silence wasn't empty, it was full of strategy. The most chilling part is that data collection by someone close is nearly invisible. Outsiders need to guess, make moves, and risk being seen. Your sibling didn't have to guess. They were inside your world, moving in plain sight while you were completely unaware. Every routine you followed, every trust you extended, every pattern in your behavior became a blueprint for them to exploit. That's why the eventual betrayal lands so hard. The groundwork was already laid, quietly, over time, without anyone noticing. People often interpret quiet family members as wise or patient, but in this case, silence was a tool. It gave them cover while they studied you. It allowed them to see how you handled conflict, how you celebrated victories, how you trusted others, and where you were soft. By the time action was taken, it didn't feel random. It felt inevitable. And that inevitability is what makes the town's reaction so intense. They weren't just shocked by the act itself. They were horrified by how methodical it had been. This kind of betrayal teaches a difficult lesson about trust. Silence from someone close isn't always golden. Sometimes it's surveillance. Sometimes it's strategy. Your sibling's quiet was never about protecting you or the family. It was about understanding you well enough to know exactly when, where, and how to strike. And when the truth finally surfaced, that realization, how easily someone had weaponized observation, made the betrayal feel unavoidable, leaving everyone not just shocked, but deeply unsettled by the level of calculated patience involved. Number 7. The disgust comes from realizing they benefited while you suffered. The moment people truly feel the weight of betrayal isn't when harm is done. It's when they see the perpetrator gain from it. Your sibling didn't just hurt you. They profited from it in ways that were obvious once the truth came to light. They didn't stumble into advantage. They stepped in deliberately, taking what they could while leaving you to carry the cost. That imbalance is what makes the reaction so intense. People can forgive pain if it's mutual, if it's shared, or if it's accidental. But when one person thrives on the suffering of another, disgust rises because fairness, integrity, and basic decency are thrown out the window. Watching someone you trusted benefit while you struggled strikes a nerve that goes deeper than anger. It's a betrayal of fundamental expectations. You expect family to protect, support, and at the very least, not exploit your weaknesses. Seeing your sibling climb, gain approval, or bask in the attention that should have been shared or rightfully yours, turns that shock into moral outrage. The town isn't just witnessing an act of betrayal, they're witnessing the exploitation of trust. And human brains are wired to react strongly to injustice, especially when it comes from someone so close. What makes it worse is that this kind of gain is often hidden until the very end, making the revelation even more shocking. The town may have seen small advantages, subtle manipulations, or moments where your sibling seemed lucky, but the pattern only becomes undeniable when the full scope is revealed. That's when the disgust hits hardest, because people realize that suffering wasn't a byproduct. It was a tool for someone else's benefit. This kind of revelation doesn't just reflect poorly on the sibling. It reframes the entire narrative of your life from their perspective. It forces everyone to see how carefully they orchestrated moments to serve themselves, how calculated their moves were, and how long they were willing to let you endure hardship while smiling, pretending, or maintaining a facade of normalcy. That realization is bitter, slow-burning, and unforgettable, because it's one thing to be hurt, but it's another to know someone gained from your pain without shame. Number 8. Your strength exposed their dependency on manipulation. The hardest truth about betrayals from someone close is that they reveal as much about the betrayer as they do about the victim. Your sibling relied on manipulation to feel in control because they couldn't match your strength naturally. Every subtle twist, every lie, every half-truth was an attempt to bend reality to their favor. They weren't prepared for your resilience, your ability to keep moving forward, to maintain composure, and to rise above the schemes left them exposed. Their whole strategy depended on you faltering, on you reacting predictably, on you breaking in ways they could exploit. But your strength made their manipulation useless. Strength has a way of laying bare the weakness of those who try to use others as tools. They counted on patterns, on predictable reactions, on fear or confusion. But as you stood firm, their control unraveled. That's why this kind of betrayal is so shocking to others. It's not just the act itself. It's the revelation that the person orchestrating it couldn't succeed without your cooperation, even if your cooperation was unspoken. Your presence, your confidence, your unwillingness to bend fully to their narrative exposed the fragility of their power. When the town saw the aftermath, part of their shock and disgust wasn't just about the betrayal. It was about the failure. Your sibling had built their entire strategy around influence and manipulation, yet your strength, calmness, and clarity left them exposed as desperate, insecure, and dependent on deceit. That dependency is humiliating to witness because it flips the script. The aggressor, the one who seemed cunning and in control, now appears weak, desperate, and petty in comparison. This exposure isn't immediate. It seeps in. People start to notice patterns they previously ignored. They see how much effort was required to maintain the illusion of control, and how fragile that control was in the face of your unwavering presence. Your strength didn't just protect you, it revealed the truth about them. It showed the town that manipulation is only as powerful as the person willing to fall for it, and you, standing tall and unaffected, proved that some strengths aren't just survival. They are unmasking forces in themselves. Number 9. The town saw how quickly they switched masks when exposed. The real shock in this story isn't just that the betrayal happened, it's how easily your sibling changed faces the moment the truth came to light. For months, maybe even years, they wore a mask that made them seem harmless, supportive, or even loyal. That mask built trust, lulled everyone into a sense of security, and created the perfect cover for their actions. But the moment exposure hit, the mask didn't just slip, it shattered, and what the town saw underneath was startling. They weren't just guilty, They were theatrical, defensive, and almost performative in how they tried to rewrite the narrative to protect themselves. Switching masks so quickly is a sign of someone who relies on appearances rather than substance. They didn't expect their true intentions to be visible, and when the world finally saw the truth, panic set in. Suddenly, the calm, familiar face everyone trusted became a mask of urgency, manipulation, and even desperation. That's what made the betrayal so unsettling for onlookers. The mask had been believable for so long precisely because it was consistent, and the sudden change made the deceit undeniable. It's one thing to lie quietly, but it's another to scramble under the pressure of accountability and reveal the depth of planning that had been happening behind the scenes. The speed at which they switched faces also amplified the disgust. People don't just recoil from the betrayal itself, they recoil from the duplicity, the ease with which someone you know can act like a completely different person, depending on who's watching. That duality exposes the manipulator's reliance on perception over reality, showing the town that everything they thought they knew about this person was carefully curated. This kind of revelation leaves a lasting impact because it forces people to reassess every interaction, every smile, every word that seemed genuine in the past. The mask didn't just hide their intentions, it shaped the reality of those around them. When the mask came off, the truth hit with a force that left no room for doubt. Your sibling's ability to switch faces so quickly didn't just expose their guilt. It exposed the fragility of trust, the ease of manipulation, and the harsh reality that some people can live double lives without anyone noticing, until they are caught. Number 10. This wasn't rivalry, it was identity theft at a spiritual level. What makes this kind of betrayal so devastating isn't the rivalry, it's the attempt to replace you entirely. Your sibling didn't just want to compete, they wanted to step into your life, your energy, and your influence as if it were theirs to claim. This goes beyond ordinary jealousy or sibling conflict. It's a theft of identity, subtle yet profound. Every habit they mimicked, every opinion they echoed, every space they tried to occupy wasn't random. It was calculated to make others see them as you, while diminishing your presence. People often dismiss this type of behavior because it doesn't look violent or aggressive on the surface. But identity theft at a spiritual level is insidious because it erodes your sense of self while creating a convincing illusion for everyone else. They weren't trying to overshadow you with force. They were trying to become you, to occupy the essence of what makes you recognizable, admirable, or influential. That's why the town's reaction was so intense. They weren't just witnessing betrayal. They were seeing someone attempt to erase your uniqueness and insert themselves in its place. The cruelty in this is intentional. It requires patience, observation, and strategy. They watched how people responded to you, learned which parts of your character drew respect, admiration, or fear, and then subtly inserted themselves in those same spaces. It's an attack on identity because it aims to confuse perception. When someone mimics your energy and accomplishments, it blurs the lines between authenticity and imitation. Suddenly, people start questioning what was yours to begin with, and yet the very attempt to steal your identity exposes their insecurity. They couldn't create influence on their own. They couldn't command respect naturally. They needed you as a blueprint, a reference point. That's why your resilience becomes so critical. It not only protects you, but it unmasks them. Every person watching realizes the difference between genuine growth and calculated imitation. This is why the betrayal feels so personal and so corrosive. It's not about competition. It's about someone trying to live as you while hoping no one notices the theft. The moment the truth comes out, it's not just a shock. It's a revelation that some people will go to extreme lengths to claim the life, presence, and identity that doesn't belong to them. Number 11. Your refusal to retaliate forced the truth to stand on its own. There's a power in restraint that many people underestimate. When betrayal hits, the instinct is to fight back, to expose, to defend yourself loudly. But in this case, your refusal to react the way your sibling expected became a force more powerful than any words or confrontation. By staying composed, by refusing to engage in theatrics, you allowed the truth to reveal itself fully. Lies and manipulation thrive on reaction. They depend on chaos, fear, or confusion to stay hidden. When you didn't provide that fuel, everything your sibling had built began to collapse under its own weight. Your restraint didn't look like power at first. To some, it may have even seemed passive, like nothing was happening. But in reality, it was strategic. By not retaliating, you forced the world and the town to pay attention to the facts, not the noise. Every inconsistency, every twisted story, every hidden agenda became visible because there was no distraction, no argument, no drama to obscure it. The truth could finally stand alone, unmasked, undeniable, and undeniable in its impact. What makes this so shocking to people is that they've rarely seen this level of control in the face of betrayal. Most reactions add layers of emotion that obscure reality. But when someone refuses to react, it forces the betrayer into the spotlight. Your sibling, who counted on chaos to hide their intentions, suddenly became exposed. Their lies, manipulation, and calculated moves were now undeniable because there was no counter-narrative coming from you. This type of response also rewrites the perception of power. People assume power comes from confrontation, from forceful action. But here, the power was quiet, measured and deliberate. It allowed justice to unfold naturally, without interference, without overexposure. Your composure became a mirror reflecting the truth in its rawest form. It didn't just protect you, it revealed your sibling for who they really were. That's why the town's reaction wasn't just shock or anger. It was a slow, dawning realization that sometimes the strongest response is no response at all, letting reality carry the weight of revelation while the betrayer crumbles under the truth. Number 12. The exposure shattered a generational illusion. Betrayal like this doesn't just reveal the actions of one person. It exposes the patterns that have been quietly tolerated for years. Families survive on unspoken rules, invisible hierarchies, and agreements to look the other way. We don't talk about it. We protect our own, no matter what. These silent codes create the illusion of loyalty, trust, and unity. But when your sibling's betrayal came to light, it didn't just expose them, it tore through the entire framework that allowed their actions to go unnoticed. The town saw more than a single act of deception. They saw a system of concealment that had been operating quietly for generations. The shock comes from realizing how normalized certain behaviors had become. People begin to question every interaction, every story, every tradition. What had been dismissed as harmless sibling rivalry, minor disagreements, or private family drama suddenly takes on a darker meaning. The betrayal isn't isolated, it's symptomatic. It exposes how family dynamics can create conditions where manipulation, envy, and exploitation are possible, and even quietly enabled. And when the town sees that, the reaction isn't just disbelief, it's disgust. Because suddenly, they realize this wasn't about you. It was about the culture that allowed someone to get away with harming the person closest to them. What makes this revelation even more powerful is its ripple effect. Once the illusion cracks, it doesn't just affect you and your sibling. It reaches everyone who had been complicit, knowingly or unknowingly. Relatives, neighbors, friends, and onlookers are forced to reassess what they thought was normal, what they considered acceptable, and what they allowed to persist. It forces a confrontation with uncomfortable truths about loyalty, morality, and accountability within families and communities. The exposure is brutal but necessary. It removes the mask that generations have worn, showing that betrayal is rarely spontaneous. It is cultivated in silence, hidden beneath appearances, and permitted by tradition. The town's shock and disgust are understandable, because they are witnessing not just one person's moral failure, but the unraveling of an entire illusion that had been maintained for years. The betrayal becomes a lens through which everyone is forced to examine the structures that allowed it, and the lesson lingers long after the initial shock fades. Number 13. They're disgusted because they recognize the same trait in themselves. The reaction of the town wasn't just shock or disbelief. It carried a subtle, unsettling layer of self-recognition. People don't recoil from betrayal solely because of what was done. They recoil because they see reflections of themselves in the actions they condemn. Your siblings' choices, cunning, and willingness to harm someone close forced others to confront uncomfortable truths about their own capacity for envy, manipulation, or selfishness. That mirror effect is what makes the disgust so profound. It's no longer just about one person's moral failure. It's about realizing that anyone, under certain pressures or desires, might act the same way. This self-recognition amplifies the intensity of the reaction. People often prefer to see wrongdoing as external, as something that exists over there or out there, somewhere removed from themselves. But when the perpetrator is family and the behavior is familiar, the line blurs. The town saw someone they knew, who shared the same environment, the same cultural norms, and even the same upbringing, commit acts they might have secretly imagined or rationalized in themselves. That proximity makes the reflection unavoidable. The disgust is part moral judgment, part fear of latent tendencies within. The recognition also forces people to reassess their own choices and past behavior. They begin to replay moments where they might have acted selfishly, where small manipulations or quiet envy shaped their interactions. Suddenly, they are not just observers of betrayal, they are participants in a moral reckoning, forced to question what separates them from someone who crossed the line. That realization stings more than the act itself, because it challenges their self-image and forces introspection that most people resist. This is why the town's reaction lingers long after the revelation. It isn't just about judging your sibling. It's about confronting a universal truth. Under certain circumstances, anyone can choose self-interest over loyalty. That recognition is uncomfortable, even terrifying, because it exposes vulnerability in everyone who witnesses it. The disgust isn't just moral, it's personal, a mirror held up to the parts of themselves they rarely allow anyone to see. The betrayal becomes more than a story. It becomes a lesson in human nature, reflection, and the uncomfortable closeness between empathy, envy, and moral failure. Number 14. This wasn't the end of your story. It was the point of separation. The most profound moment in a betrayal like this isn't when the truth comes out. It's when the aftermath forces a realignment of everything you thought was permanent. The betrayal didn't mark your downfall. It marked the line between who belongs in your life and who doesn't. It drew a clear boundary, separating the people who were aligned with your growth from those who wanted to ride your success, manipulate your influence, or diminish your presence. This is the point where clarity emerges, where illusions crumble, and where the roles people play in your life are revealed in their rawest form. Separation isn't always easy, especially when it involves family. Society teaches us that blood ties are unbreakable, that loyalty should be automatic, and that enduring hardship with family is virtuous. But when someone close betrays you, their actions create a natural exit point. They show, with undeniable evidence, that they cannot and will not coexist with the truth of your rise. The town watching sees it too, the shock, the disgust, the whispered recognition that some bonds aren't sacred, they're transactional, conditional, and ultimately replaceable. This moment of separation is both painful and liberating. Painful because it forces confrontation with loss, trust broken, and shared history tainted. Liberating because it clears space for authenticity, growth, and alignment with people who genuinely support you. It's the point where you stop fighting for approval that will never come and start reclaiming the energy that was spent on managing manipulation. The betrayal, in essence, becomes a filter, separating your allies from those who were only along for the ride. The town feels it too. Their shock turns into awe as they watch you remain steadfast, unshaken, and free from the narrative your sibling tried to control. This separation is not a retreat, it is an ascension. It signals that while betrayal may have touched your life, it cannot define it. What begins here is a new chapter, one shaped by clarity, strength, and discernment. The story continues, not in spite of what happened, but because of it. The betrayal becomes the turning point that reveals who belongs, who doesn't, and who will stand by you as the life you were always meant to live unfolds fully. Conclusion. Betrayal of this magnitude doesn't just shake a family. It shakes entire communities, reputations, and the way people perceive loyalty, trust, and identity. From the first moment of shock to the lingering realization of intent, manipulation, and exploitation, every piece of this story reveals something profound about human nature, relationships, and the power dynamics that often go unnoticed until the truth is undeniable. We've seen how proximity can be weaponized, how familiarity can cloak deception, and how silence can hide surveillance. We've witnessed the audacity of someone trying not just to compete with you, but to replace you, and the remarkable strength it takes to remain steadfast in the face of such calculated actions. The exposure of betrayal unravels more than a single act. It exposes systems, patterns, and generational illusions that quietly shape behavior. It forces not only the betrayed, but also the witnesses, to confront uncomfortable truths about envy, ambition, and moral compromise. And through all of this, the real revelation emerges. True strength isn't measured by retaliation or aggression. It's measured by composure, clarity, and the ability to let reality carry the weight of justice while the betrayer crumbles under their own schemes. The point of separation that follows isn't a loss, it's liberation. It is the moment when boundaries are clarified, illusions are shattered, and the stage is set for authentic growth, alignment, and the life you were always meant to live. This story is more than a cautionary tale. It's a blueprint for understanding the subtle, often hidden ways betrayal manifests, and the profound power that comes from recognizing, enduring, and ultimately rising above it. It's a lesson in discernment, resilience, and the unwavering truth that your path cannot be derailed by those who sought to undermine it. If this story resonated with you, if it opened your eyes to truths you hadn't considered, or if you've ever experienced betrayal in your own life and needed to see the path to clarity, make sure you subscribe to the channel for more insights like this. Like this video to show your support, leave a comment sharing your thoughts or experiences, and share it with someone who needs to hear it. The more we uncover these truths together, the stronger and more aware we become. Don't miss out on the next deep dive. Stay with us, because the journey to understanding and empowerment has only just begun. God bless you.